We'll start with a few questions at the top and then throw it open to the floor. Richard and Ian, if I could start with you. Over 30 years ago, you worked together on two of Ian's books. You worked on The Ploughman's Lunch and The Imitation Game. And Ian, I came across a quote from you. You described it as sweetly uncomplicated working with him. And I wondered why The Children Act was perfect for your third collaboration and why it took you so long to get together again.
Well, I can't claim for a minute that Richard is sweetly uncomplicated. I think he'd take that as an insult. But the process was... Do I need this or not?
Yes. I think you might, yeah.
Okay, so the process was sweetly uncomplicated. Richard and I thought we'd like to do a State of the Nation movie. We were much taken with the Polish Wajda Man of Iron series. I met Richard. He was running the National Theatre at the time. I showed him in his lunch break a page of a synopsis of something I'd like to write. He liked it. I wrote it. Channel 4 came up with the money. And within months we were shooting it. And I thought, well, this is how you make movies. And I'll spend the rest of my life interleaving novels and movies in the same way. And then I spent the next 2 years working with Bertolucci on a movie that never got made. And then I began to understand just how difficult the process is at every level, and how heroic Duncan has been in keeping this on track.
Richard, would you like to comment on that?
Yes. Is this working?
Yep.
Well, this is why Ian is a fiction writer, because most of that is untrue. Actually, the first time we worked together was I had been running a theatre in Nottingham. Then I was a producer of a TV strand of drama called Play for Today. And I commissioned Ian to write a film, which I directed, and it was the first film I directed. It was called The Imitation Game. And it was but much better than the recent Imitation Game. But it was based on the same notion of Alan Turing's notion, the Imitation Game. So we did that together for television. And then I wasn't actually running the National Theatre when we made The Ploughman's Lunch. No, I wasn't. I had just directed Guys and Dolls, and we both lived in Stockwell. And that was how we saw a lot of each other, and that was how we did, painlessly, we did The Ploughman's Lunch, starring Margaret Thatcher and Michael Heseltine in the climax. She was a bit over the top, but and then it was a long time, and I was running the National Theatre, so I couldn't make films. And then we started talking after I'd left the National Theatre about making another film together. Then Ian moved very close to where I live in the country, and when he was writing The Children Act, he said to me, I'm writing something that I think would make a film. And then he sent me the manuscript. I loved it, and then he wrote a script, and then we decided to approach the best producer that we could think of, and so that's when Duncan came into the picture.
Emma and Finn, next question to you, Emma. If you could steal one of those mics, that would be great. Yeah. Thank you. Fiona and Adam's relationship it's highly unusual, and it's very highly charged as well. I think that hospital scene is a real crucible of emotions for them and for us. I just wondered if you would describe the effect each has on the other.
Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I can go first. Go on. Yeah. I think in that scene, Adam's just so kind of encaptured by Fiona, and she kind of opens him up to this world of possibility that he's never really been parlayed to before. Kind of he's lived quite a sheltered kind of upbringing, and so meeting her and kind of everything she represents and the world she comes from is kind of just this awakening moment for him, I think. And so that whole scene is just his fascination with her and his fascination with this sort of alien world that he's never really been a part of. It's kind of the way I felt.
And also that she really listens to him and takes him seriously. And I don't know, you probably all have had a moment where someone who's older than you, a proper adult person, or perhaps you haven't, but the first person who actually really listened to you and took you seriously, it has a huge effect on you. You suddenly think that your opinions or the things that you have to say might be of worth. And that's a massively important moment, because she I don't think expects what she finds. She expects a child who's been sheltered and perhaps not very well educated and who might be unimaginative and perhaps a bit ordinary and perhaps even a bit dull. I think she has assumptions that are blown away by this flame of life that she encounters, who then turns her listening around by listening so hard and then asking her very direct and difficult questions, which she has no choice but to answer. So it is a pivotal scene emotionally, and they do have he transfers, of course, a lot of stuff, and she has a parental reaction. I mean, all people, men, women, whether they are parents or not, have parental feelings, and this is one of the things that is inspired in her, is this maternal response. So it's very powerful, very multi-layered scene. And then there's music at the end of it, which just puts the tin lid on it, you know.
Duncan, you have produced some of our best loved and our most successful films, but I felt that the London of The Children Act looked very different from the London of, say, Notting Hill or Four Weddings and a Funeral. And I wondered how crucial it was getting access to our legal institutions, you know, in setting the authenticity and the tone. And who was helpful in that regard in giving you access?
Well, we were determined to make it authentic, because there's no point in making it a fictional world when the real one is there. But if we hadn't had Sir Alan Ward, who was our legal consultant, we would never have had the keys to the kingdom. Sir Alan was a great friend of Ian's, and in fact, apparently, was the reason that Ian wrote the novel in the first place, because some of the cases that are in the novel are inspired by cases that were tried or judged by Sir Alan. He's this extraordinary man, now retired, but his name opens every door in the legal world, and he got us in just with one phone call to meet with the under-treasurer of Gray's Inn, is the person who actually calls the shots. And so Ian and Alan and Richard and I went in, and we spent, I think, 2 hours sitting across the table from this awestruck under-treasurer. But they were amazing, and so we were given almost free access to the real places where the story took place. So have you guys seen the film? Yeah. So the concert at the end is in the Great Hall of Gray's Inn, a room in which one Shakespeare play, I can't remember which one it was premiered, apparently for Queen Elizabeth. It's sort of extraordinary to think of that. And so the apartment where Fiona and Jack live used to be Alan Ward's apartment, is now Joshua Rosenberg's apartment, and it's exactly where we filmed it. The interior we built at Pinewood. I'm sure you all want to live in that apartment, having seen the film, and but that was built, and the courtroom was also built because we didn't want to film in the one courtroom in London that everybody films in. All of the TV shows are in this dark oak interior, and so ours is based on the actual courtroom, one of the actual courtrooms in the children's in the family division of the High Court, and it was built exactly as an exact replica, and at Pinewood. But everything else, and somebody said, a journalist, I think it was, who said early on, I ride the bus every day down High Holborn, and I've always wondered what happens over those walls, and now I know. And I think that's part of the pleasure of the film, is getting entree into this real legal world.
Just one more question, I think, for Ian and Richard, and then we'll open it to the floor. It was great to see an enhanced role, I thought, for the clerk, Nigel Pauling, so superbly played by Jason Watkins. I wondered if you'd just comment a little bit on, why you made that change, and any other shift in, the book to film adaptation that you felt was really necessary for the film.
Well, more or less kept the clerk in. It's an extraordinary relationship. He knows everything, the clerk, and keeping him sort of both close with an unstated knowledge of what's troubling her. He witnesses her sort of falling apart in private and yet keeping everything together in her professional life, and never speaks. I mean, he witnesses the kiss, for example, the very transgressive kiss towards the end of the film, and then it's beyond question he would never raise this matter with her. So it was a great fascination for us, I think, to bring that to life. It's rather like having, you know, Batman in the old army days, and the valet does know the soul of the master.
It's like a dresser in the theatre. Just on the adaptation from the novel, I mean, reading a novel is a sort of reflective act, and it's not in the present tense. I mean, you rarely sit down, start a novel and read to the end in one sitting, whereas a film, by definition, exists in the present tense. And so the dynamic, the pulse of a film and the momentum of a film has to be wholly different. And we were concerned that it should exist as a film with the qualities and the momentum of a feature film, rather than attempt to replicate the dynamic of the novel. So there are quite substantial changes to the story, to the narrative from in the film, from the novel, which were within the script and then changed further when we were editing.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, there's a couple of hands going up. Siobhan, would you like to lead off?
Ian, it's not shown in the film that it's unusual for judges to visit bedside. Is there actual legal precedent for this?
Well, absolutely. Alan Ward presided over a case of a teenage Jehovah Witness boy, and did go to his bedside. Now, admittedly, this was when, in such a case, the boy would be a ward of court. So this is 25 years ago. It's unusual, but not without precedent. So Alan told me his story. He went to the boy's bedside. They talked about football non-stop. He ruled, as usually happens, that the hospital could treat against the boy's will. Afterwards, the boy made a good recovery, took him to a football match, happened to know all the directors, went to Tottenham Hotspur. Manchester United, was it? A boy met all his stars, and then 7 or 8 years later, Alan saw in a footnote that the boy then in his 20s had got ill again, gone got to hospital, and had died there refusing the transfusion. Alan told me this story while we were waiting for a concert to begin, and I thought, this is a gift. I'm hearing a short novel. It rarely happens like that to me. But yes, precedents are there.
Okay. Russell, you have a question there? Yeah.
My question is to Emma and Fionn. Obviously, this is a story in which characters with a great deal of pain and tender sincerity are tackling some of the most profound and important questions in our lives. I'd be curious to hear from both of you how closely aligned you felt your own feelings on those issues were with your characters, and whether the relationship between them had the same kind of impact on you that it clearly does on them throughout this story.
Are you talking about the issue of transfusion?
I mean, I think in a wider and more profound sense, I guess the questions that Fionn's character is asking about, life, death, what all of this means, the questions that those letters pose for Milady.
Well, I think that when he does write, I mean, he's transferred so much onto her, hasn't he? I mean, it's an enormous transference, as the psychoanalyst would say, of his attentions, his affections. He's in love with her in a way that a 17-year-old can be in love with someone who's much older and unreachable. So you know, these are our love letters, and they're to do with his feelings about being alive suddenly when he was looking death in the face. I mean, it's a very unusual and very highly charged moment for a young person, because most young people feel those feelings but haven't actually been facing death. That's what's unusual about him. And there's so much to tackle, really. But she's someone who sits in those above. You sit in court above everyone. You have this extraordinary overview. It's very difficult not to feel omniscient, not to feel omnipotent in such a situation. And suddenly, when he faces her, she has none of that, and she doesn't know what to do. He confuses. It's confusing her, and in fact, she makes some bad decisions about how she responds to him. She is unkind to him, actually, I think, and she could have dealt with it much, much better had she had access to her own emotional landscape at the time. But of course, she's very confused as to what's going on. So it's one of those strange borders between your private and your personal life, where your personal life's very unbalanced and out of whack, and then suddenly within the professional life, you're also faced with an extremely challenging personal relationship. I think that your question's quite hard to answer, because it's a very, it kind of goes in so many different directions. But Finn, you try, because you're better than me.
I don't think that's true at all. I'm better than you, I mean, not your answer.
I mean, you're very clear. You're very clear.
I think that for Adam, well, I guess like I already said, Fiona arriving and deciding that he should be transfused does open up a world of possibilities to him. And also the sort of post-transfusion, the fact that he gets better and the fact that he feels kind of healthier and keeps going with life is something that's, I don't think he's really considered a life after that. Especially not with the opening up of, you know, like love poetry and kind of all the rest of the world, like creativity. And I think that I guess the interesting thing playing the character is because he's led such a sheltered life from any of these things. It's quite a bizarre thing to try and see the world through the eyes of someone who's never known these things from birth, kind of thing. It's quite an alien thing. I don't think many people have really ever been through it, unless you are a Jehovah's Witness or part of a religion like that. Yeah. So I think it does he just latches onto her from the get-go, because she is his only way in, is like how he sees it, and just becomes very obsessed with her and follows her around, and she's kind of his only in to that world. Like everyone else in his life that he surrounds himself by are Jehovah's Witness, and they are kind of, you know, his family and his whole world. So he is compelled to follow her, and I guess in a sense thinks that she can kind of save him from something. Yeah.
Okay, yes, there's a lady just back there. Yeah.
Question for Duncan. How difficult is it to get serious adult movies off the ground these days in a world where it's all sort of Marvel?
It's quite hard. It was not easy. But then, you know, when you start with a novel by Ian McEwan, and you have Richard Eyre directing it, and you have Emma Thompson starring in it, it becomes a lot easier. But still, as you say, it's not a Marvel extravaganza, because that's what movies have sort of become now. You know, all those movies that we all watched in the 70s don't get made anymore, so it was a sort of act of faith in the end. That, of course, distributors always reduce it down to, well, if it's not very good, if it's not very well made, can we still get an audience to go and see it? And of course, everyone will go and see a film with Emma in it. So Emma was really our our saving grace. And well, we've even said Emma was so perfect for the role that we probably wouldn't have made the film anyway, whether we could have or not, if Emma had not taken it on. I mean, it comes at a price. You know, you have to scale down because if it's only women over 50 who are going to, you know, they make these very, very quick calculations unless the film is good. And you know, listen, I love the film. I am so proud of it. And in this circumstance, hopefully everybody will go and see it. And then it'll look like a clever thing to have made. But it is to make a film that's got serious intentions about real things is quite hard these days.
I just have to add something to that, because I was talking to a journalist this morning, a young Asian, British Asian stand-up comic, who said, you know, she's just like a Marvel superhero in the beginning. I said, really? And he said, yeah, well, when she's in the courtroom doing cutting through those things, he says it's like, she's so badass. She's like a superhero, and then things go wrong. I said, oh, you mean she's like Superman in the third one, you know, where he kind of goes over to the dark side slightly. And he said, yeah. And I thought, oh, I'd never thought of it like that. That's very illuminating. Anyway, I'm just saying.
Get a cape for the next one. Yeah, there's a lady there. Third row back. Yes, you. Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yes.
So, does that mean can't count? Emma, can I ask you about the time you spent at the High Court observing judges and what that experience was like, what you learned from actually watching justice?
It was just one of the greatest privileges, really. Backstage at the Bailey and in those places, only judges and their clerks are allowed to walk on the red carpet. It's extraordinary. The arcane hierarchies within that system are amazing. For starters, that's just very surprising. And then you suddenly realise that they are these godlike creatures in their robes walking around with this extraordinary power. And hardly any women have that kind of power in the world, ever. So you're playing something very unusual. And then I met, and quite a number of them, I watched them in action and I talked to them afterwards. Watching them in action, which was the thing I did first, was extraordinary because they listen with their whole bodies. It's like they go so still, and the way they listen is so focused. It's determined listening, you know, with such intention. And so you can understand why Silks could get a bit nervous with that ear upon them. I mean, it's their task to listen and then calibrate and recalibrate the information that's coming in over and over, and like this extraordinary computer. It's the level of work and brain power is amazing. And then I got to know two judges personally who've now become friends, and my admiration for them extended even further. I mean, to combine that sense of power, that actual power with compassion, with bringing up 4 children, for instance, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and doing all the work so that she can see the children off to school on one of them, you know, the other one's married to a farmer. That this level of capacity they are superhuman to me.
Can I also say, and I was with Emma for most of these meetings, and one of them said to us, you have to understand that every single case that we're adjudicating contains pain. And so every single case, this is the family division, so it's divorce, it's custody, it's cruelty, it's nobody comes in front of them by definition who is, as it were, there for a laugh or has committed a crime and hopes they'll get away with it. Everybody's lives in front of them are in some way damaged, and very, very, on the whole, very severely damaged if they've got that far. And so constantly dealing with pain, not in the way that a surgeon deals with pain, where you can detach it and the patient is anaesthetized, but you're sitting there looking on one side of the court, there are people in agony, and on the other side of the court, there are people in agony.
Yeah, and further, it's so true. And the other thing to note, just because it's of interest, is that the family court is considered the sort of poor cousin. you know, criminal. That's the, you know, that's the sort of macho guy thing. That's the, you know, that's where the real stuff happens. But the family court's a little bit, you know, it's and of course that's just typical, frankly. But it's where the real drama and the real pain. It's terrifying. I mean, that's why Ian was so interested and was so drawn to it, because all human life is there. It's like the Greek myths every fucking day.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid time is against us, but we'll let you finish it and go ahead. We're getting the wind-up signal. No, go ahead, you finish.
Yeah,
please.
just briefly to say that I was at Alan Ward's house for dinner one night, long before any thoughts of the Children Act on my mind, and there were a few other judges sitting around the table, and what surprised and amused me was the extent to which they knew each other's judgments. And they knew them as pieces of literature, and they teased each other, and they quoted each other. And then I found myself with a book of Alan's bound judgments on my lap. And I thought, what a treasure this is. I mean, it's as if the whole of the 19th century novel was being played out and encapsulated in very elegant prose, 2,500 words. And it's absolutely right, and Richard is right, that it's not only his pain, sometimes there are conflicting goods. Interests that collide, and again, a decision has to be made. And yet, our movies, our novels are full of the criminal courts. This is a great treasure trove, neglected. I'm very happy that we've found a route in through Alan, especially into the Royal Courts of Justice, to be right there.
Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen. Will you show your appreciation for our guests this afternoon, please? Thank you.